Welcome back to Vlogging with Mark. We are going to be talking this week about the final part of 1 Corinthians 15, where Paul is going to continue on this theme of resurrection. Based upon Jesus' resurrection, believers can know that they have a physical resurrection that is coming upon their death. He continues on in the following verses to talk about our victory through bodily resurrection. So we're going to discuss that further Sunday on why it's important to believe in a bodily resurrection and not simply a physical resurrection. And we're going to see how all of these play together, that the Jesus' resurrection, our spiritual resurrection, and our bodily resurrection all connect to help us to understand deeply that word at the beginning of the chapter where Paul says, I'm passing on to you this gospel. Because once we understand what the gospel is, we need to see how that plays out in our lives. We're also going to spend some time talking about how we can make this a part of our everyday, ordinary journey as we celebrate the resurrection of Jesus and our resurrections, both spiritual and physical. Thank you for watching. We're back in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, the latter part of it. I want to remind you that we have talked about Jesus' resurrection as well as believers' spiritual resurrection. Paul is going to conclude his chapter with the argument for the bodily resurrection of believers. If we go back to the resurrection of Jesus, one of the things the gospel writers are very clear to tell us is that there is a bodily resurrection of Jesus. Indeed, he still has scars as proof that he is the risen Lord, the same Lord who died on the cross, who was pierced in the side and nails through his hands. This is the bodily resurrection of Jesus, showing us that the God who created all things, that he formed men and women out of the dust of the ground, spoke them into being, breathed life into them. We see that the physical body is not to be disregarded, that the physical body is important. And Paul wants to spend some time on this because there is a false doctrine coming in to the Corinthian church via false teachers, telling them that the body is not all that important. It's a spin-off, if you will, of Gnosticism, this theology or this teaching that exalts knowledge and does this to the point of neglecting the physical. And usually there are two responses to this. One is that because the physical doesn't count, I can do with my body whatever I please. This leads to hedonism, selfishness, mistreatment of others, etc. The other extreme for this is that the body doesn't matter, and therefore I need to put it into subjection. Sometimes people even hurt themselves physically to point out this body does not matter. Now you can see the danger of both extremes. And so Paul here is going to talk about the value of the body. And then he concludes the chapter with one of my favorite passages where he's actually quoting again from the Old Testament, which if you recall, for the past month previous to this, we've been talking about the Psalms. Well, here again we see a quotation, a connection between the Old and New Testament where he says, where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting? What Paul is doing there, he's connecting Old Testament words to New Testament teaching. And this is profound for us. So I want to encourage you to come Sunday prepared to talk about and listen to this idea of the bodily resurrection and how that bodily resurrection, joined with the physical resurrection, based upon Jesus' resurrection, can give us the boldness and confidence to be able to say, where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting? Death is certainly a reality, but for Christians, it's not the same reality as for those who have no hope. So come find more about that on Sunday. Thanks for watching.